Supreme Court showdown brewing over President Trump's revised travel ban. Late last night, the Trump administration asked the nation's highest court to take up the case for oral arguments and overturn the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals decision to freeze the executive order on travel. The president's order would temporarily ban travelers from 6 mostly Muslim countries in the Middle East. Iraq was removed from that list in the revision. Joining us this morning is former Army Intelligence Officer Andrew Peek. Andrew, good to see you today. Thanks for being here.
Great to see you, Maria.
So what do you think about the Supreme Court? You think it takes up this case?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see how it can't. I think since the appeals court ruled on this and the lower court ruled on this, both sides have gotten a little bit more ammunition for their argument. I expect the Trump administration to look at the Manchester bombing and say, hey, look, the parents of the Manchester bomber were immigrants from Libya. We knew that the bomber himself traveled to Libya shortly before the bombing. The vetting procedures need to be reviewed, and this is just a temporary measure to give us time to review those procedures. I think the other side is going to say, look, we still have this issue of the bomber was a UK citizen, that this would not have stopped him. And so I think everything until this, it was impossible not to see as kind of a dress rehearsal for this final showdown at the Supreme Court.
What do you guys think? How does this play out?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty interesting just given the fact that the previous administration did have bans on a lot of these countries. And so for this contention to happen and now the ban isn't in effect, so we actually don't really have a great vetting process right now in restricting it. So that's the issue that we're having right now. It is an issue of national security, and the last administration recognized it, and we need to get this fixed sooner rather than later.
Andrew, it's Jacob McDowell, but the administration and the government can improve the vetting without this ban being in place. So what are immigrations and customs doing to make sure that people coming into this country are safe, if you will?
Well, one of the things they're doing is looking at how much speech they should be reviewing before they get admitted as immigrants or refugees or whatever, right? What are they saying on Facebook? What are they saying on Twitter? Should this stuff that is not necessarily violent and not necessarily and protected once they become permanent residents under the Constitution, should this be bans for disqualifying them? So yes, they can certainly do these things without the injunction, but just as clearly it is within the administration's prerogative, I think, as a defender of the national interest and national security and commander-in-chief, to decide who can come into the country. Like, that is also clearly, it seems to me, within the prerogative of the United States government. But again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just an intel guy.
No, but you would think so. I mean, meanwhile, Andrew, there's this North Carolina billboard that's showing support for the travel ban. It's drawing criticism for mentioning the 9/11 terrorist attack. Here's what it says, quote, "Why support President Trump's immigration ban? 19 Muslim immigrants killed, 2,977 Americans, September 11, 2001. Your thoughts?
Well, factually, it's quite right. Most of those hijackers were here on tourist visas. Now, none of them were from the 6 countries that are mentioned in the travel ban. So I think that's a clear point of deviation from would this have stopped 9/11. However, I think Mike Flynn's point originally when this issue was being discussed, and the Trump administration's position now, is that this is just one of a number of measures that are going to sort of slice the salami here of the terrorist threat, in addition to potentially banning laptops on airplanes and other kind of counterterrorism measures that the administration can take to keep us safe.
Andrew, did you find that fascinating? I just saw 19 Muslim immigrants, and actually that's alluding to the 19 hijackers from Saudi Arabia, which is not part of this travel ban, and we saw in the 28 pages that came out that just got released. That's one of the biggest issues we have because they support Wahhabism. So, I mean, isn't the issue also not just these 6 countries, but it's also the whole region?
Absolutely, and Saudi Arabia is probably the most challenging problem here because it's a key strategic ally, but at the same time it funds and supports the most radical version of Islam in schools and madrasas and mosques around the world. So I think you really have to look at limiting the amount of foreign money that can go into domestic religious institutions in this country and make sure that indigenous Muslim communities aren't having their voices drowned out, not by the government, but by foreign preachers who preach Wahhabism.
Yeah, the radicals. Let me mention that Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, just a couple of hours ago, touched down in Singapore for the region's Defense and Security Forum. Now, he's looking to reassure our Asia-Pacific allies in the region amid the looming threat from North Korea. What do you want to hear from the Secretary? What do you expect from the Secretary's trip on this?
Well, the biggest surprise of this administration is how friendly the president has been with China, and largely that's due to him focusing on North Korea and an effort to get Chinese pressure on North Korea to stop the missile tests. But that's been profoundly worrying to our other Pacific Rim allies. You know, I find it noticeable that Mattis's trip comes right on the heels of a U.S. Navy ship sailing within 12 nautical miles of a Chinese-built island in the South China Sea. So I think it is part and parcel of a renewed commitment to the region and say, hey, even though we are focused on North Korea, we are still committed to your defense, to your maritime rights, and to not allowing you to fall under Chinese domination.
Yeah, that's great analysis. Andrew, it's great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Maria.
Andrew Peak joining us there.